Hello and welcome to the Other Kind of Doctor podcast. My name is Gemma.
And my name is Gaia, and we are both on the journey of gaining a PhD.
A quick disclaimer before we start. We are in fact the academic kind of doctors.
Well, nearly doctors.
Yes, nearly doctors. But we're not your medical kind of doctors.
So if you do need medical attention, please contact your GP.
Now, let's get on with the episode.
Hello!
Hello everyone. Welcome back to episode
6?
Oh my goodness, we've been doing this for 6 weeks.
I know. Actually 7. No, you're right.
6
it was
weeks.
6.
All right.
I thought we missed one, but we didn't.
Yeah, so what are we talking about today, Gaia?
We're talking about dealing with rejection.
Dealing with rejection, yeah, this is a big thing in academia.
Yep.
I think if you are not getting rejected in academia, well, good for you. But
How?
How, first of all. But we've actually just finished our discussion with our guest today, Professor Saloni Krishnan. She's from the psychology department at Royal Holloway, but we have a really great discussion with her. She's actually
super successful.
She's super successful. She made Prof last year, so she's a professor, and she has done some really amazing work, but equally she's also had a fair amount of a rejection in her career. So she talks about her top tips to deal with rejection, her experiences, and how to kind of pick yourself up.
Yeah, but before going there, we can take this as a chance to just talk about ourselves.
Yeah, that would be nice. We do like doing that.
So, how's your week been?
Well, this actually leads quite nicely onto podcast discussion today, because this week, I remember a few weeks ago, do you remember I said I was preparing my paper for submission? Indeed. Well, it got rejected twice.
Yeah.
From 2 journals. So I've been licking my wounds this week, but also picking myself up and doing other things to pass the time, analysis and, coding, very exciting stuff. What about you? What have you been up to?
I have been moving. Moving
house, wow.
I've also been working, but when you're moving and all your brain is filled with is just moving. I've been moving this week.
Yeah, well, when are you moving in? Next week?
End of the month, yes.
Well, that's going to be fun for you.
Oh, so fun. But anyway.
Anyway, that's all from us. Well, for the intro.
Yeah.
But without further ado, let's get on with the episode.
Woo-hoo. Hello.
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 We've got another guest on this week.
So exciting.
We are with Professor Saloni Krishnan.
Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
No offence, Saloni, but we're actually talking about dealing with rejection in academia. And that doesn't mean that we think you're a reject or anything.
No,
like
she's
that.
very successful.
Only actually made Prof last round of promotion, so she is super successful, and we are all a bit in awe, really. But I wondered we start this with all of our guests. If you can tell us a bit about you, a bit about your PhD, and kind of your career post-PhD, I guess.
Where you're now.
It's a big question, sorry.
It is a big question. So I did my PhD at Birkbeck as part of the Center for Brain and Cognitive Development. I've always been really interested in language and language development and how this sometimes goes wrong and how some children struggle to learn their native language. So in my PhD, I was mostly focusing on typical language, and then I went on to do a postdoc at the ICN where I amazingly worked with beatboxers and guitarists, so that was quite different
so cool.
to what I ended up doing. But then I went back to my roots, so to speak, and worked with kids with developmental language disorder or DLD, and that was as a postdoc in Oxford. And then in 2019 I came to Royal Holloway and started my own lab.
Nice.
Wow, that is a busy few years. That's really exciting.
So you're very successful, and we're assuming you also got a lot of rejections. But before we go there, the reason we want to talk about this is because as academics we're all going to deal with lots of rejections, and the first rejection is always awful, because we were talking about this, and like in undergrad, people who go on to do PhDs, they're always like first of the class, always get firsts, and then you get your first rejection and you're crushed.
Yeah.
I remember I didn't get my PhD first round. I got it on the second round, and I was like, my life is over.
Yeah. I think it's because we're just used to being perfectionists. We're used to like getting everything right the first time. And then when my first public paper got rejected last week, and it was very upsetting. But it's just like, yeah, that first rejection hurt. So I wondered if you could tell us about, if you remember the first time you experienced rejection in academia.
Oh, it's even more trivial than some of those. So I was coming from India, where I hadn't really done any research. I didn't really know that much about what a research paper looks like. And I'd done this kind of thing on the side as part of my master's, where I was looking at like auditory environments and so on, and how kids kind of looked for objects in these auditory environments. So we wrote this up and we sent this to a journal called JASA. Now JASA, if you're a speech and language therapist or an audiologist, is a very, very famous journal. But to the rest of the world, obviously, like nobody knows what JASA is. So I was very excited. I wrote up this paper and sent it. And they sent it back to me saying that, I hadn't got their formatting correct. So my first test rejection wasn't even a content rejection. It was literally a format rejection. And then I had to rejig the format and kind of send it. JASA never took it. And I think at this time I went to a seminar conducted as part of my PhD where they were talking about editorial rates of acceptance, and how at one of the journals that they were editing at the time, Developmental Science, that the rejection rate was 80%. And I remember just being shocked.
Oh my God.
80%?
Yeah.
That is really harsh. I mean, the formatting of journals, I didn't realise this until I submitted that paper. I mean, it was actually got 2 desk rejection because we were aiming for a really high, big journal. You might as well try.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of the formatting things, you need an inch margin, you need double spacing, it needs to be in Times New Roman. I'm sitting there like, does this really matter? But clearly it's important for some journals, I guess.
Yeah, that's changing a bit now, but I think particularly JASA was very much wedded to it has to be in this very specific format.
Oh, well, you're a prof now, and you submit lots of grants. Do you still get nervous that you're gonna get rejected? And if yes, how do you cope?
Oh, I get rejected all the time. I think someone I know had this thing once about collecting rejections, and I thought that was interesting because I think if you're not getting rejected, you're probably not putting yourself out there.
That's a good point.
If you're not putting yourself out there, then you're probably not taking the chances and challenges that you should be. We just got a big grant rejected, and it was something we worked on for ages that I was really excited about, and it's part of academia, and the quicker you can kind of learn to bounce back, the easier your career as an academic will be. It's not personal.
That was really one of the questions.
That is really nice, and I think it's important to kind of normalise rejection. I think it's such an alien concept to other professions. One of our questions actually is how do you
not take them personally?
Yeah, how do you not take it personally? Obviously you invest so much time, and I think in academia your research is your identity almost, and when you put sleepless nights or whatever, if you've got a good work-life balance, obviously that doesn't happen, but when submitting up to deadlines and things like that, how do you not take it personally when
and how
someone's
do you get motivation to redo it all over again?
I guess I'm just coming off the back of a rejection, so maybe it's good to remind myself of some of these things. The first ones are really, really hard because you have no experience of having been rejected, I guess. I think that over time, if you've been rejected enough, you're like, well, actually, I did get that big rejection, but I was fine in the end. I picked myself up and it was okay. And then it gets easier to pick yourself up and make it okay. And you also learn what works for you in terms of picking yourself up. So for me, it's anticipating something new, thinking about new things. So whenever I submit something, I start working on something else so that when the inevitable rejection comes,
rejection,
I'm already in a space of being excited about other ideas and being feeling like I have energy to do other things. Yeah.
That's such a good point.
I think it's really nice actually to get excited about other things and to realise, this grant application with this paper isn't your whole career. You've got all of these other exciting things going on. Something I've been really struggling with in my PhD, because I do developmental research, is getting into schools and doing research with schools. And Gaia knows this. I've had many a tantrum about schools rejecting me or not letting me in to do the research, and it's really frustrating. But actually, a couple of weeks ago, I had another school pull out 2 days before I was supposed to go in. It was brutal. But I actually came up with a little research idea to kind of look at the barriers and facilitators of getting into schools. So that's kind of a good thing that came out of it.
Yeah.
It's another probably another side project I don't have time to do, but again, it's something to get excited about, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing about being resilient. So someone I worked with told me, this is in the face of my 4th fellowship rejection, that I was a very resilient person. And I just remember thinking like, what? Resilient? But I think looking back, I guess I stayed in academia and I got that rejection, but I found another thing to do and then found another thing to do and found things that sparked interest and I was genuinely pleased to do. So I think figuring that out and just saying that actually this rejection isn't the end of the world is, yeah.
And it's a skill that I think you have to learn over time. Gaia always talks about the fact that when she got a 2-1 rather than a first in her masters, she cried in the toilet.
It wasn't the overall grade, I want to say. It was just a coursework. However, I did cry in the toilets in Founders.
She did. And I think, but obviously now, if you were
Don't
to
care
get,
at all.
It's that building that resilience. And I think that's what makes a difference between what makes like a good academic and academic researcher. Yeah, you could be really smart and be really good at everything, but if you can't deal with maybe some of the barriers or challenges that come your way, then you're not really going to succeed, I guess, or put yourself out there in case you get rejected.
Feel very bitter, I guess. It's like that things haven't worked out, whereas actually you just have to be like, right, that wasn't the right idea or wasn't the right package or wasn't the right fit. Got to try something else.
Yeah, reading the coursework back now, it wasn't great. It was a 68, okay? But at the time, I was very angry.
Don't read back on your past work. It's horrible.
No.
Well, but that's also the thing, right? Like now, I mean, I used to get very upset about papers getting rejected, but now I sit on the other side as an editor, and you can start to see really common things about why people might get rejected, or be like, this just isn't ready, or this isn't at this level that it needs to be at, or whatever. It gets easier because you can see it happening more and more. And you also see the side that I guess you don't see when you're submitting as an author, because you see all the successes, you see all the published papers, but you don't see all of the great work that has been rejected in the background, because that's just not in your consciousness or awareness.
Yeah, I do think that it's nice that you were talking about collecting rejections, because even in like department newsletters and things like that, you see all of these publications which are lovely, and it's really great to see all of the success of others. But if you just had a grant rejected, or desk rejected, or something like that,
just had a bad week,
or just had a bad week, you're like, oh, I'm never going to get my paper published. But yeah, you just kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that feeling. It's a hard feeling because it's not a feeling that you want to kind of believe in. But I feel like one thing that other people do when they see that newsletter is I just try and write to people, like, especially if they've had a grant or a really cool new paper that is sort of like, I know how much work has gone into it, to actually write and say, like, well done. Yeah. And I found that someone did that to me and I got really excited. And the cool thing is that when eventually your paper does come out, you've actually collected loads of goodwill along the way and you've spread some love as well.
Oh, that is so lovely.
Cheers.
I'm going to start writing. I'm going to start filling everyone's inbox. Congratulations. They're like, who is this weird PhD student emailing me?
But I haven't been doing that off late, actually. So now I'm feeling a little bit bad about people I haven't emailed with their success.
Everyone that's listening to this is
like, she emailed everyone except me.
Oh, I love that.
Why do you think rejection is so prevalent in academia and so less prevalent in anywhere else?
I don't know if it's less prevalent anywhere else. I just think it maybe takes different forms. I mean, it's really easy for people to lose their jobs in other places, right?
Okay,
and,
fair enough.
That's like ultimate rejection. But I think one of the nice things about academia is we're trying to solve a problem to the best version or the best level that we could solve it, right? And that takes time and effort. And I think we collectively want to agree that the effort that we make is the best possible way to tackle this problem. And we want our peers to be inspired and excited by that. And I guess the other thing is you're competing for limited amounts of what's very frequently taxpayer money in the case of grants, right? And there isn't that much of it to kind of go around. So, of course, some people have to win and some people don't. The success rates for these things are between 10 and 20%. So I guess over the course of your career, you can have a lot more losses than wins.
Yeah, I remember it is definitely about celebrating the wins that you do get and even the small wins.
Yeah.
So when I submitted that paper, I didn't know that it got rejected or would get rejected, but I did, have a little celebration about it. It was my first paper. I'd actually finished writing it up. It had been 2 years in the process, and actually going through the process of submitting, which is a long process. I didn't realise that it would be that long, like filling out all the forms and doing a declaration of interest, all of that, boring stuff, and actually pressing that submit button and getting a little email through being like, you've submitted your paper. I'm like, oh, finally. And then I got an email 3 days later saying, we don't want to.
No, but I think you're absolutely right. There are things that you control, and then you put in the work and the effort on like writing that paper, and it will eventually find a good home. But you celebrate the fact that you've done that and you've got to the kind of completion point of that project. I think that's one other reason that I think rejections really hurt, is because what you thought was finished is not. It's like right back on the top of your to-do list.
Yeah, that satisfaction of crossing that off, and you're like, oh no, wait, I've actually got to do it again.
Just thinking about it right now.
Sorry.
Just can't even.
So you mentioned earlier briefly that you're, as being like an editor and a reviewer, does this change your perception of rejection and negative feedback? And do you think that changes? Obviously, you've been on the other side of being rejected. Does that change the way that you give feedback, or?
Yeah, I try really hard to kind of couch my feedback. It's interesting from a journal point of view, right? Because if you actually give really specific feedback, and the feedback is really, this wasn't good enough for this journal, right? It's not the kind of quality. But you say these 3 things, then the authors will come back and say, but we fixed this thing, so now is it good enough? And so actually sometimes you have to be a bit vague so that you can't have the sort of, no, we're not going to go through this like 1,000 times. So I think I'm better at realizing when no means no, but I'm also a little bit more confident about using things like appeals processes where it's like, oh, yeah, actually they didn't understand, or they got this like completely wrong. And I'm better at calibrating where my paper would fit. As a PhD student, I had no idea where a piece of work should go, right? I was like, this is the best piece of work, I've done it. I'm like, so it clearly should be like in Nature or whatever. Whereas now I think I have a better sense of, this was important, but perhaps not groundbreaking, whereas this is much more of a breakthrough result or much more of a breakthrough method.
That leads right to our next question, which is, are you more confident now because you've been on the other side, so you review paper and you've written paper. Are you more confident disagreeing with the reviewers now that you've been on the other side as well?
I had really good supervisors, and they taught me to be pretty confident about disagreeing with reviewers right from the get-go. And you'll see that kind of, obviously that confidence increases, and, but yeah, I feel like right from the get-go, you don't just do what the reviewer says. You always think about whether that's the right thing to do and believe that intimately, like, that piece of work better than anyone else.
Nice.
I love that. So I think it's good to kind of finish with a top tip for PhD students. I wondered if you could give us your top tip for PhD students that are experiencing their first rejections, or almost like preparing them for the rejection world of academia, I guess.
Build a network so that when you get the acceptances, you have people to lift you up and cheer with you, and then when you get the rejections, you've got someone to kind of, say, are you okay? How are you doing? I think that's really, really important, to have these people who are like, that rejection, that's not personal. You're still amazing. You need that. And, maybe you're not a person who likes those networks, but, figure out that thing that makes you feel amazing. And this is not one top tip. This is getting into a list of top tips. But
no, we want all the top tips.
But I think sometimes you've got to have something else to lean into that's not necessarily academia, or that's not necessarily just something that you can feel really good about, or you can do, and then you've got to do that, right? Just to kind of give yourself back the, I'm a valuable person.
No, everyone hates me. I really like that community aspect,
Yeah.
and I think that is something that we definitely vouch for in the PhD community. I think doing a PhD can be a really lonely thing, and even if you maybe don't have a PhD office, you work from home or you're part-time, if you can even have an online community or anything like that you can kind of be like, do you know what, I got rejected today, and they'd be like, do you know what, I got rejected too, let's go and get a drink down the pub or whatever. And then when you do, something really does like happen that you really are happy about, like having a paper accepted or having a grant accepted, then yeah, you can be like, let's go and have another drink down the pub.
Yeah, there's lots of drinks down the pub, huh?
Obviously you can do other things apart from going down the pub.
That's just what we do on a Wednesday. Anyway, where can people find you online if they want to follow you?
So I guess the lab website, which is encodelab.com, and then on, I guess, Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it.
That's amazing.
Cool.
Well, it's so lovely to have you on, Saloni.
Thank you.
And it's so nice to have someone super experienced in successfulness. And
Sure.
if that's a word, just invented the word there, and also, normalising rejection in academia. It's definitely made me feel better.
Same.
I'm ready to pick myself up and resubmit my paper to somewhere
For the
else.
100th time.
All right.
It won't take that long. It'll find its home.
Exactly.
Well.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you. Brain bites.
Brain bites. Woo. What are we talking about today? But for those of you who may not have listened to previous episodes, Brain Bites is a part of our podcast where we find some interesting research that we found that week. It might be completely unrelated to what we've been talking about for the rest of the episode, but it's just something fun and interesting that we've found.
Yeah.
What are we talking about
So
today?
this week we're going to talk about, remember when you had to go to the swimming pool as a child and your mum was like, do not eat like an hour before swimming? Is that a thing or is it just a myth? And we thought about this because I've been discussing this with my partner. I was sure you could not eat before swimming.
You gave him a lecture on it about how you
this
shouldn't
has
be
been going on
swimming.
for weeks. I was like, you're wrong, and I'm obviously right. And was I?
Well, we had a look, and there's two pieces of research that we found. In 2005, so a fair few years ago, researchers in Australia found that swimmers may increase their risk of experiencing a stitch or like cramp if you're exercising fewer than 2 hours after a big meal. However, there was no evidence of a major threat to health.
So in 2011, a review by an advisory panel of the American Red Cross found that there is nothing to suggest that eating before swimming constitutes a risk of drowning, so it can be dismissed as a myth. However...
So you were wrong.
I was.
You were wrong. I think you need to owe your partner an apology.
I will not. However, you listeners, please do not eat before swimming, because if you do drown, don't.
I don't know what you were trying to say there. I think what Gaia was trying to say...
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day. I think what Gaia was trying to say is if you do drown, remember, we are not medical doctors.
Ah, yes.
We are the other kind of doctor.
Yeah, so do not sue us, but also don't drown.
Yeah, don't drown, but also don't sue us if you do.
Yeah.
And that's it for Brain
Anyways,
Bites.
yeah.
That's the end of the episode. Please don't forget to subscribe and review our podcast. When we're recording this, we've had 2 episodes come out so far.
It's been very exciting.
It's been really exciting. So yeah, please do subscribe and review. Thanks so much for Saloni for coming on today. It was really interesting and useful.
Thank you to the Doctoral School for funding the podcast and to our team for the support. Follow us on Twitter at otherdoctor_pod.
Yep.
And
our transcription can be found on our website, which links will be in the description of the podcast.
yeah.
So thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.